We are staring at a stick.
Hold on, let me see. Sorry. That was the point of the conversation to have a
The
conversation
prep.
with the stick.
I know technical difficulties. They all start out like that. So, welcome, Jado. Would you like to
Hi, I'm
introduce
Jenny.
yourself?
I'm Jenny. Hello, everybody. Today we're talking on raising awareness on a topic. Um, this is just going to be like a casual conversation between me and Jeff. So, um, would you like to start the conversation, Jeff, and we can just go with it?
So, you had brought to my attention that there is a lack of like acknowledgement or awareness in the Asian culture around like mental health, right?
Yeah.
So why is that an important issue for you? Where does that kind of like touch you, and why is that relevant right now?
Well, I feel it's very important. I'm at the age where it's just I see it all around me. Sometimes, in yourself, you don't know if you're diagnosed, if you have something yourself. But it's just in my culture, I'm Vietnamese, like it's not something that we talk about. And from growing up, from when you're young all the way till when you're older, and then it's just you get diagnosed with something that you were not aware that you had. Um, but in my country, it's just not something that we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And if you had something wrong with your mind or you're acting different, then people would just look at you like, you're crazy and people wouldn't want to be around you. And I feel that it's just, people don't know about coping with it because it's not something that they're aware that they have. So, it's just what do people do? People drink. They have sort of, I don't know, different coping mechanisms of drugs or alcohol.
Yeah, like coping
So,
mechanisms rather than treatment or medicine or like the appropriate help for whatever the condition is, right? And it's because
yeah.
there's a lack of awareness.
Yeah, and I just feel that it's just like even in my country alone, it's just, from Vietnam, do they have the education of it, of what mental
Yeah.
illness or what mental health is? And I heard a story one time where an older Vietnamese lady told me that if their child had mental illness or mental health, they would just hide them at home because it'd be something shameful to talk about. And so they don't want the world to know that their child is different. So this is something where what happens when you have something wrong with your mind and you don't know who to reach out to, how to talk about it, and it's just it kills you inside. So what about you, in your culture?
So it's interesting, right? Because I've traveled to Japan several times throughout my life, and one thing I noticed was that there is not like things are not wheelchair accessible. Maybe there's like an elevator somewhere to maybe kind of get from like different floors, but there's not like ramps, there's not like guardrails, stuff like that, like the typical stuff we see out here, right? And also just in general, like through my experience of traveling around in Japan and exploring, I never really saw people like with mental illness or people that were handicapped, like even people with crutches or wheelchairs, like. And in my mind, I was always like, okay, cool, like we're healthier, where we take care of ourselves in Japan, so it's not like a concern. And it was fucked up because I found out what the reality of it was. And the reality is that, similar to what you said, is like in Vietnam, the people whose families like that have kids that have disabilities or they have mental illness issues, they get kept at home. They're not allowed to go outside. They're not brought out into public for the same reason, where it's like there's a sense of shame or the embarrassment of having like that person coming from your genetic line. And so there's a lack of awareness because people don't interact with them. There's a lack of accessibility because they're not out in public needing to do things or able to do things because they are kept at home. And it broke my heart when I found this out, and it was like, that is not how I envision Japan, right? Like that's a different side of things where it's like it looks really nice and it's all kept clean and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not all rainbows and butterflies. There's actually a dark side to it. And in terms of mental health, right? Like Japan has one of the highest suicide rates, especially in their workforce, because the culture just demands so much of the employees. Where it's like you work tirelessly, you work from you literally go to work, you get off work, you go to dinner, you drink with your friends, and a lot of time they wake up hungover and go straight to work from like either the bar or the train station or whatever it is. It's like you don't have enough time for yourself to enjoy life or healthy things, and it's like you're literally kind of numbing yourself the moment you leave work to be able to go back the next day. And that high stress environment creates just depression, right? And so there's a lot of suicide in Japan because of that. And that part of it is talked about and somewhat acknowledged, but I don't know how acknowledged it is in Japan, right? We hear about it a lot in the US where it's like, oh, look at this article about the comparative suicide rates in Japan or whatever. But in terms of, what's being done, is there active, you know, solutions that are being put in place in the workforce or even just mental health assistance? I don't know if those things are available in Japan, and is it readily available like it is here? And even here, there's like a stigma where that stuff carries over. Maybe not to the extent that it is in our countries back home, but here there's still a lack of acknowledgement and resources and awareness in the Asian community. Even though those things do exist here now, there is still that stigma of like the shame or the embarrassment of having someone related to you with those conditions and not wanting to acknowledge it, or even like, because Asian culture is like, we're very prideful, right? So it's like they're always comparing each other, like, oh, my kid did this or that, or my kid graduated from here, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like you never want to acknowledge the bad side of things. So that's
Yes.
been my experience in Japan.
Yeah, it's just that's why with the mental health, mental illness, it's just like, how do you approach it with, your friends around you when, they don't want to talk about it? And it's just like telling them, hey, you know what, I'm here for you. But, those individuals feeling like, what, is it denial that, what, I'm okay, I don't want to talk about it. Um, where do you go get help or get educated on this? Do you go talk to somebody? Because it's just, what is the process over here? How can people help themselves?
So 988 988 is the new suicide hotline. That is one resource where someone going through depression, they can call that number, right? Similar to like 911, right? You dial 988 and a trained professional will answer and be able to kind of, assist you through that time. And then in terms of everything else, right, there are resources available. After I kind of edit and compile this video for YouTube, then I will try to share some links for, the different things I find, or if anyone watching has recommendations, send those over to me so I can include that. But I think the main part of it is letting go of the pride and the ego and breaking the generational, stereotypes that have existed for so long. And even us just having this conversation openly is a step in the right direction, where it's like, okay, well, we're bringing awareness to it, right? Another another side of it too is the vulnerability, and with us being open to talking about it and being vulnerable with it, I think it can start to have the effect where other people may be inclined to do the same. And I personally have not been diagnosed with anything I'm aware of, but I have, as we were talking about before, like I've kind of self-diagnosed myself with like ADD and OCD, right? Like I find myself, um, you know, hyperactive and having trouble focus, especially during school. I would always be fidgeting and like bouncing in my chair, the leg bounce. So I found
So,
that. Go ahead.
sorry to cut you off. So, when you were in school, was it like in elementary school that you were doing these type of behaviors, or?
I remember it heavily in like junior high, where it was like I would do the leg bounce and stuff. Um, so that's when it started, like through junior high, high school, college. Um, and then like so I also have, and I don't know if this is OCD or if this is maybe like a mild thing of autism, right? Like I when I walk around or if I walk upstairs, like I count the stairs. And
Okay.
then when I like walk, if I'm like walking through a neighborhood, like every tree I pass, I'll like just subconsciously count. Like, and I don't know why I do that. And I know that in some of the research I've done that that can be like a trait of autism, where there's like hyperfixation on things and counting and just over analyzing data. So I don't know. I feel like at some degree or some point I'm probably on some spectrum of something. I don't know. And again, that lack of awareness, right? Like no one ever said, "Hey, go get diagnosed or checked out for ADD." As a kid, I do remember my parents kind of put me into what was it? Oh, like an anger management thing. And I remember
Okay.
there was a giant teddy bear, one of those giant Costco teddy bears, and then like a
Uh-huh.
one-way mirror. And it was funny because I knew it was a one-way mirror because afterwards I got to go behind the mirror and see into the room where the teddy bear was. And I'm like, I was just in there and they were telling me to like they gave me like a box of checkers and they're like, pretend like the teddy bear's your dad and throw the checkers at him. And I'm like, but I'm not mad and that's not my dad and I'm not mad at my dad. So it didn't make sense to me. And I don't think
Yeah.
that test or that platform was the right tool for me personally. But I do remember after that I was not like ever really angry or mad. And I don't know what else happened. Maybe there was medicine involved. I don't think so though. I don't remember like taking pills as a child. So I don't know, but my memory is a little fuzzy from that time. But I do remember that experience of going into that room with the teddy bear, like throw checkers at it, and I'm like, why? Like this doesn't make sense to me. But you know, there was that was the only thing I remember doing for any type of like I don't know what you call it, like a mental health check, right?
Uh-huh.
Because even for I don't know what the process is for when they do test for like ADD or ADHD.
And what about OCD? Is that something with it too, or is it just
I don't know if there's a diagnosis for OCD, like obsessive compulsive disorder. I'm sure there is actually, but my experience of it is just like my dad. We would always call him like a clean freak or a neat freak, and like that kind of carried on to me. Where there's certain things that I do in a certain way, or like when I go to the beach, like as a kid, I used to hate the sand on my feet, and I would be constantly like rinsing my feet off, which was like pointless because then you walk through the sand again and you're
yeah.
surrounded by it, right?
Yeah.
So stuff like that, like I don't know, right? But again, like me sharing that, I don't know if that would invite someone else to open up and be like, hey, you know, like this was my experience or this was something that I was actually medically diagnosed with, you know. And I'm hoping that, you know, us talking about this, maybe in the comments section, people will share their story with their culture, their personal, whatever it is. Because I don't want to be here speaking on someone else's behalf, right? I can only
Yeah.
share my experience.
Yeah, because it's just even when you talk on like autism and stuff, it's just like sometimes when you hear like being a parent right now, hearing that your child has it, you're just disappointed. And then you feel like, oh no, they're different. But when you look at a positive sense of it, there's like ways to like, help them, like, putting them through like classes. There's classes for kids with autism. So I think that sometimes when they think of something where, oh, you have ADD or autism, it's always looked upon as something. I think what from my own experience, I think the older generation, they look at it as like a disappointment where, oh no, my child's not normal. And then sometimes it carries down to us when you become a parent. Like if someone told you that, well, your child has autism or your child has ADHD, and then you're just like, well, how? And then it's just, I think that it's having that open mind to understand it and be like, okay, well, how can I help it?
It's funny too,
And
right? Because it strikes a nerve when it's your child because it's like they came from me, so does that mean
yeah,
I have it? And there's that
yeah,
ego and the pride that's like in denial, like nah, there's no way, there's no way my kid has it because that means they got it from me and I don't have it.
yeah,
But the
yeah,
reality is, you know, even with what you said, where my child's different or whatever, right? Like that itself is true no matter what they have. Like every child is unique in their every sense of everything, right? Like your
Yeah.
child is not like any other child. So whatever condition that is tied to that still makes them unique. And a lot of times, especially with autism, my experience of it is it's a gift, right? Like there's there is something, and again, not to use this word in a derogatory way, but there is something actually special within. And I think with any of these conditions, it can be, depending on the perception you have, it can be viewed that way, where there are unique qualities and traits that can be beneficial if looked at with that perspective. Where I know, and again, specifically regarding autism, because that's one of the ones I'm more familiar with, there is like hyper fixation on details or certain like hobbies or whatever their likes are. They get hyper fixated on that specific thing to the point that they master it and they know every detail and they can recall and remember everything about it. And it's, to me, that's a gift, right? Like that's almost like a
Yeah.
superpower. And so really how
Yeah.
you perceive it and how you look at it is what makes the difference. And I think the what we're taught from our culture is like it goes back to, you know, everything else where we're taught this one thing and so we kind of carry that on, but having the realization of it and kind of shifting the narrative for ourselves so that it's not looked at in a negative perspective, right?
Yeah, I think that shifting it to look at things in a positive sense, having that open mind, being educated on that matter. And I think that that would help out. But it's just, just letting everybody know out there that there is a positive solution to it. And it's just, earlier when you were talking about the 988, like suicide, like line, it's just, is there like a process before that they can get educated on before it gets to that point?
Ooh,
So,
yeah. I mean, depression comes from so many things, but
yeah.
the conditioning we have and the structure set up in our society is like it doesn't leave room for that. And so it's
Hmm.
work that has to be done outside of any like establishment. Like you're not going to be taught that at school, you're not going to be taught that at work. It's like something you have to do in your own time. And our happiness is always put like last. Like that's
Yeah.
literally ingrained in us from like infancy, right? Like and it's sad, but the reality is like yeah, we all want to be happy, right? Like the
Yeah.
what's the American dream, like the or the pursuit of happiness, right? That's where's that come from? That's part of, I'm drawing a blank. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't.
It's like one of the, I don't know if it's not the Constitution, but something where it's like we are allowed to pursue happiness. That's like a
Uh-huh.
given right for I think Americans or all people. Let me Google this. I don't
Yeah.
want to talk out of my ass.
Okay.
Pursuit of happiness. Quote. Uh, Law. An inalienable right enumerated in the Declaration of Independence. In addition to life and liberty, the right to pursue any legal activity as long as it does not infringe on the rights of others. So it is in the Declaration of Independence. So as Americans, we have the right to pursue happiness. And so, like it's interesting where that's in our government institution, but also everything else around it is like preventing that, right?
See, and I think that that's another thing. They say, okay, it's in the Declaration, but it's just, you know what? Would you say that, you work hard like 40 hours, sometimes, I don't know, 50 hours in a week, and it's just sometimes, you know, like you were talking about your culture earlier where it seems like you hustle all day. You work, you go drinking, and then you go to work the next day.
Right.
And it's just like, with that, it's just, where do you have the time where it's just to relax? Your mind is always going, you're always like hustling, and it's just, um, you know, is it something that would sometimes compromise, like, your mental health or sometimes your inner peace? Because it's just, this is what I know, and I'm just going with it. And
I think that's where like capitalism and social media and all that comes into play, where it's like what we think is happiness is all instant gratification.
uh-huh,
All the infomercials we see, all the ads that we see, that tells us what we think happiness is. And it is the furthest thing from what actual happiness is, right? Because it looks the exact opposite. It is not partying and going out constantly and drinking and having fun, right? Like that doesn't create happiness. It creates happiness in that moment, but it's not sustainable, right? You burn out,
yeah,
you lose energy, you lose focus. Like true actual happiness is like something that comes from within. Being at
yeah,
peace with yourself. And again,
uh-huh,
this goes back to our mindset of things, right? The conditioning we have where it's like taking the time to do inner work and reflect on these things and realize what we actually need. But that's dangerous, and that actually is a threat to like marketing and capitalism and all of that, where it's like, okay, but if people started doing that, then they're not spending money at bars, then they're not buying tangible physical items, now they're growing their own food, now they're taking time to like do things that are free in nature, they're not spending money going on lavish vacations and all of these things that we are taught and told that that's where happiness comes from. And so it creates this imbalance where it's like what we really seek out versus what is just jammed down our throat constantly. And social media has only made that easier, where it's like, okay, all my friends are posting their happiest moments and they're traveling and going on vacation or going to parties and all of those things that we just talked about that are instant gratification. And you even mentioned it where we were talking about like, how have I been spending my weekends? It's like I spend my weekends doing work towards something I'm passionate about or taking me time, right? Like you haven't seen me in a party setting in a while because I haven't been partying. And I've been so
yeah,
much happier, where it's like for all of my 20s that is what I did. But by no means was I happy, right? I've had some amazing experiences that I think some people would give a limb for to have. But during that time, I was not happy, right? It looked like I was
yeah,
happy. That's what social media would have you believe. But the truth was I wasn't happy. Now that I'm like not off the grid, but I'm a lot more like reserved into myself, like I'm a genuinely a lot happier. And externally, it may not look that way. And some people may be concerned where it's like, yo, where's this fool been? He's been MIA. But it's because I've broken out of that cycle and the conditioning I had before where instant gratification is no longer what I'm seeking. And that's where it all starts, right? If everyone does the inner work for themselves, it creates kind of a ripple effect, right? Where it's like, okay, well, where do we go to get this help? And again, we're always looking external for something. And it all
yeah,
starts with yourself. Like, if I want to get help, let me convince myself that I need it or that I want it. Because it's so easy to just be like, I don't need anything. Like, let me just go smoke some weed. Let me go drink some alcohol. Like, let me escape from what I'm actually needing. Because it's so much easier, right? It's comfortable. Whereas, like, having to sit with the potential for that I may have a mental illness or that I may be depressed or whatever it looks like, right? Like, that is very uncomfortable. And so it's, why would I want to dive into that when the reality is that will change your life in for the better, right?
yeah. Like another thing that I thought about was like 2020. I mean, we both live in America. We seen things like shit hit the fan and everything. But like when you look at like the other countries, like in like Japan, China, like Vietnam, like the Philippines, all those countries, it's just what is your thought process of like their lockdown compared to ours, and like how would that basically mentally like get to somebody? Um, from For me, I went back to Vietnam actually before the pandemic happened in February.
Like 2020, February 2020.
So, um, when Kobe Bryant passed away in January, I had a planned trip to Vietnam, and no one knew about what was going on with this COVID, and we were thinking, should we cancel a trip? Should we go? Um, we I did my research on it. There was like, things that I heard from my friends in, China, where people were dying, and they were on a lockdown. And then, when you just watch the videos where it's like, it may be propaganda, it may be real or fake. It's just very extreme how the lockdown was. And so, went over to Vietnam. They were actually on lockdown. They abided by all the rules and everything. And it's just nothing was open. No restaurants were open. And people were masked up. They followed the rules and everything. Um, and they were okay with it. I didn't see anybody like, you know, fighting it or anything. But it's just compared to what I saw in China, or when I hear about like other countries, it's just Vietnam was just okay. We'll follow the rules,
Yeah.
you know. But then, you come over here. I didn't think that it would be that bad over here. I thought, okay, we have good medical equipment, everything, and didn't think that it would hit hard over here. But it's just, I would say over there it was really bad, but people followed the rules, and you know, um, it was very bad in the beginning, but it's very different over there, the way that they handle things. Because I know that Japan at one point was like a level 3 where you could even travel into the country, and it's just, I haven't had any experience from Japan, but just seeing Vietnam, like, they follow the rules and everything. And there were some people that didn't follow the rules, where they felt like they wanted to go to a fashion show in Italy, where Italy was really bad. But it's just, even with that sense, where you have people that follow the rules and you have those that will just break them. But over here, I would say, with that, mental health wise, being locked down, it can take a toll on people. Um, but looking at, all those countries, researching it following the rules, and they were fine. But I think that was another thing that I saw over here, where, there was a lot of people that didn't like those rules that they had to follow. So, but that was my experience over in Vietnam from when the pandemic first happened. And it's just very different from over here.
Right. So I'm trying to pick my words carefully, and I'm going to circumvent parts of your question to avoid
Yeah.
getting into a political conversation.
Yes. Yeah.
But in terms of like the effect COVID had on like mental health, right? Like us being quarantined at home and isolated away from friends and family definitely played a part in a lot of people's like mental wellness, because
Yeah.
as human beings, right, we are social creatures.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember, like, you remember the movie I, Robot, right?
Yeah.
And then all the robots in that one storage container were like grouped up in a corner. Even though they were robots, right? They still wanted to like stand near each other. And it just kind of like showed that like even through the code, right? Like human nature, or I guess the artificial intelligence that was ingrained into them, that I think came from us, right? We're just drawn to each other. We need human connection.
Yeah.
And like in the prison system, what is it? Not isolation, but what's it called? When you're like segregated and they put you in a cell by yourself.
Solitary
Yeah,
confinement.
solitary confinement, right? Like that's a punishment where you're literally forced to not interact with anyone. And so there's definitely an effect when we're not allowed to like interact with each other, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean 2020 definitely created I guess just an environment where a lot more came out, where a lot more people fell into like depressive episodes or states because of that, right? And especially if you
Yeah.
were living alone at the time, right? Like I had roommates. Some moved out during the time, some moved in, and things changed around me. But it was I still had people to interact with. Whereas like if I was by myself for like 2 years and not going out in public and not interacting with people, yeah, I'm sure it would have had a detrimental effect on my well-being. For you yourself, right? You were with your family, right?
Yeah, but it was different for me because I was in a sense essential where I went to work.
Ah, okay. So you still interacted, right? And it's
Yeah.
yeah. How about for your kids? Did you notice anything with them that, like going to school virtually, did that change their social skills or anything?
Well, it's just, for my older son, he was always asking like why he can't go out with friends.
Mm,
But once again, you educate them on the issue that's going on, um, and letting them know that, this is COVID, and, we can't be out because, people can be sick. But I think overall, just educating them on what the situation is. And, with my son, he learned to mask up and just make sure he does his part. So I think overall, with that 2020, it affected us, like some people mentally. Um, but I think through that, um, there was a situation where I did an English paper on the pandemic, and they asked me what the positive came out of the pandemic. Um, because when you touch on it, there are some people that do can't handle the isolation and everything. But I think that with um, the pandemic, it helped us slow down a little bit,
mm-hmm.
spend time with family.
Yeah.
Parents got to, like, parents that got to work from home got to sort of homeschool their kids.
Yeah.
So, overall, I think that when you're talking about the situation in Japan, I would honestly be really burnt out if I had to work, go drinking, then go to work the next day. And that is a 40-hour period
That's how
because
some of
I
my
think,
friends live now.
huh?
That's how some of my
Yeah.
friends live
And
now.
yeah, and it's just like, where do you sleep? And when do you have time to sleep? So it's just, mentally it'll burn you out. But I think that, overall, with the pandemic, I look from the positive aspect of it where, you slow down with life. And sometimes some people, they couldn't handle that because they're used to, like, the 40-hour grind and working and everything. So that was something that was thrown at me where I had to write a paper about. And it made me think, like, what are the positives that did come out of it?
Yeah.
And so I guess from my standpoint, I don't know, I can't speak for anybody else, but, would you say that, if there was something where you're feeling like sad or not yourself, that you would sit here and just be me and you, that you would self-reflect on what the matter is, um, think about the issue, and then try to find like a coping mechanism and find a solution for yourself, and um, find a positive outcome out of it.
So you mentioned coping mechanism. I wouldn't look for a coping mechanism based on how I define coping mechanism because I feel like
Yeah,
a coping mechanism is instant gratification, kind of like a band-aid for like,
yeah,
you know, hemorrhage bleeding or something where you really need to address the root of the issue. And if you
yeah,
don't, you'll eventually it'll get worse over time. And so I wouldn't
yeah,
look for a coping mechanism, but if it is something that is not a physical issue in my life where there's not like a physical change, then yeah, if I could change my perception about it to have a more positive outlook on it, kind of like we were talking about, like a diagnosis where, yeah, there is a physical reality that's brought into place, but what actually changed? Because it's not like this is a new thing. This is something they've been living with for as long as they've been
Yeah.
living with it, right? It's
Yeah.
not a new condition that formed. It's now just your perception of it. Like today is no different than yesterday, but now you have awareness of it. And so, what can you do with that new awareness? You can be sad about it, but what will that do? Or you can
Yeah.
educate yourself, learn about it, and say, okay, what are the pros and cons to this? How do we address this? And create a fulfilling life for that individual or yourself, right?
Yeah.
So, not a coping mechanism, but how do you kind of heal from the issue or accept the issue or whatever
Yes.
needs to happen so that you can have a healthy outlook on whatever it is. And just like with COVID, where it's like, okay, here are circumstances somewhat out of our control, somewhat in our control, where people had choices and options on how they wanted to go about things, where it's like, yeah, you should stay home, but you don't have to. Or
Yeah.
you shut down your work and you're an essential worker, so yeah, go to work, and others, it's an option, or you close down. And so, depending on those circumstances, you can be like, oh shit, I don't get to work, or oh shit, I get to stay home and hang out with family, right? How you perceive that opportunity will create the mindset you have, the emotions you have about it, right? But again, it goes back to that inner work that is done before it reaches that point where it's like, how do you already perceive things that happen in your life? Do you look at everything like a problem, or do you look at it as an opportunity? And that goes back to the individual's mental health and their mental state at the time, where it's unique to everyone, but we all have the ability and the power to take control of that for ourselves and say, okay, like I am always upset about circumstances that are in my control or out of my control, but what can you do, right? You can make a better choice for yourself, in the parts that you do control, and the stuff that's out of your control. Like, what are you frustrated about? What are you gonna, if you can't change it, then what good does it to put energy and thought into it and really just spiral in your mind to be like, well, I'm fixated on this now, like, and that's where all my focus goes, and I'm sad about it. So then you go back to a default coping mechanism of like, let me get out of my head. Let me go smoke. Let me go drink. Let me go do drugs. Let me go have sex. Whatever your outlet is, right?
Yeah.
And you're again band-aiding the issue that really needs to be healed and addressed in the right way.
Yeah. But overall, with this conversation, I hope that other people can chime in and give their input and educate. For me, the reason why I wanted to have this conversation is just um, it sparked up because you know mental illness, mental health, it's like all around us. Um, in the Asian culture, it's not talked about a lot. Um, I want to know how people handle it in different cultures, or do you
Yeah.
handle it at all? Do you talk about it? Um, I mean, I'm giving my insight from the Vietnamese culture. They don't talk about it much, and I
Yeah.
just feel that you don't want to wait until you're older to find out that what is wrong with my mind, and then sometimes people think, okay, is it because I'm getting older? Am I getting senile? But it's just acknowledging it and accepting it, and
One thing, the
yeah,
verbiage. I wouldn't phrase it as what is wrong with my mind, but
yeah,
what is going on, right? Because it's
hmm,
not right or wrong. It's just this is how your mind works in whatever way and
yeah,
capacity that it is. So the verbiage we use is one step towards bringing awareness and bringing kind of like shedding light onto the issue, right? And our
yeah,
perception of it. So I think yeah, like you mentioned, it would be great if people would share or comment with their experience, what it is like for them in their culture, or if they have experienced like personally anything related to the things we've talked about, right? And again, creating almost like a forum in the comments of this to say, just sharing and bringing awareness so that people can realize like, hey, you're not alone in whatever struggle you have. Like, there are a lot of Japanese people that have XYZ. There's a lot of Vietnamese people that have XYZ. Same with all the other cultures, right? And there's similarities that we can all relate to that don't get talked about. And so, really, just creating a safe space for us to kind of start doing that. And that's why like when you commented and said, hey, you'd love to talk about this, I was all for it because it doesn't get talked about. There is not light shed on it. So I commend you for, wanting to take that step and that initiative. So thank you so much for having the bravery to, sit and talk about this openly. Because again, not a lot of us do that.
Yeah, and it's something that you can raise awareness for your friends. Like, sometimes some of them are not open to talk about it. And sometimes when we hang out with our friends, we don't talk about these type of matters.
Yeah.
When we go hang out, you just want, like, you're getting off of work, you just want to talk about happy things. Hey, what are you doing over the weekend? Hey, like, as I asked you earlier, like, what do you do now? Like, it's just, you're doing things to, like, better, like, your life and everything. And it's just, what were you doing, like, years ago, partying, and now you're doing things to, like, better yourself. But it's just, like, we don't sit here and talk about, like, important matters, because I feel that when the topic comes up, some of your friends are just like, can you talk about something happy? And it's just, sometimes, you just tell your friends that, hey, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
But it's just, are you? And so it's raising that openness that your friends, it's okay to talk about stuff like this. Because I think sometimes even around our own friends, you can't express yourself, because if you started expressing yourself, your friends are like, oh my gosh, like, you're so weird, and it's just, then you're like, okay, I'm not going to talk about it anymore.
Can I share a secret with you?
Yeah.
That is a narrative we all have in our head. That is a story every one of us carries. But the moment you break that cycle and you start to do that with your friends, it is reciprocated. And if it's not, then that's telling of something else, right? But the moment I started being more open and talking about deeper things with other people, the more they would lean in and have that conversation with me. But again, prior to that, I had that same perception where it's like, I don't want to talk about this shit with my friends because they're going to think I'm weird or they're going to think I'm crazy. But we all think that. And so as you get to create that space for others. And by doing this already, you've started that. But now carry it on to every conversation and every interaction you have with the people you care about. Where it's like we're all waiting for someone else to take that step and bring it up, because we all feel like everyone's going to judge us. But the moment someone starts that, it snowballs, right? So after this call, as you go back into your life, do that. Because it will have an effect, right? You will create waves. And the people around you will feel it, they'll see it, and some of them will pick it up and do it themselves. And then our community is now impacted and changed because you started to do something different. You broke the cycle, right? And we get to start that here and now from this conversation onward.
Yeah, so I mean, I really appreciate the fact that I reached out to you and you were very open about this, because it's not something easy to talk to people about, because it's like, okay, but you took the time to gather this together, and you know what? I hope that this opens up other conversations. People will chime in with their own experience. I want to hear like other people's experience, and this to help one another. I don't think that it helps with just being quiet about it, and I think that it's just the culture, because you just don't want to talk about it, or you don't want to feel weird. But hopefully, I hope this will open something, and we can have more conversations where more people would chime in, because I'm excited to hear other people's input. Listening to your own experience, like, it's enlightening. It's like it provides me awareness and education in your country, so.
Real quick, are you familiar with who IVA M28 is?
Yes.
Yeah? Is that a friend?
Yes, it is.
They are requesting to join us, and I'm going to let them in.
Okay.
And they jumped in and left. What happened?
Did they? Okay. Maybe they might come back, or it was an accident.
It might have been an accident. I was like, look, someone wants to join the conversation now in real time. Well, you could follow up with them after to see.
Yeah, but I mean, this is a start,
Yeah.
and it's just a fact. Oh, the internet. Is she trying to chime in?
I don't know. Let's try again.
Are you trying to chime in, Iva?
She's declining though.
She's laughing right now.
Would you like to join us? I would love additional input.
Does it? Did she write anything afterwards?
I just saw the laughing face. Sorry,
Okay.
internet, and laughing.
Okay.
But yeah.
But yeah.
She's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about.
It's just improvising. It's just improvising. You can join in and give your input, but maybe you can join on the next one. Iva, we're just talking about.
Hey, don't be scared. Just jump in and she'll break it down for you.
Yeah, Iva. I just see her laughing right now. But overall, Iva, it was just a topic about the Vietnamese culture and how, mental health, mental illness is just taboo in our culture. Not a lot of people talk about it. I reached out to Jeff to see if he was open to have a conversation about it. And he did this live feed. Okay, she's not ready.
I'm not ready.
But yeah, that's what we're talking about. It's just overall just raising the awareness in our cultures and just talking about it. It's not trying to help people out there, but people can chime in with their own experiences. They can provide us some education. I'd like to learn about people's experience, or they can just provide me some education on the matter.
Yeah.
But this is just an open forum just to talk about it, and this is our first one. So yeah, when she's ready.
You could sidebar with her after and be like, hey, get some talking points.
Honestly, it's just I was trying to find people from different countries to actually talk about it, because it's just, I only know about Vietnam, you know about Japan, I want to know about other countries,
Yeah.
And it's just together we can come together and help each other, just talk about it. And, people just want to listen, people can just listen, but it's just something that we're not like a helpline or anything, but it's just something that people could just listen to. I know sometimes people out there, they feel ashamed alone, but it's just listening to this will hopefully maybe help. And hey, if they want to chime in, like, we're here to listen. I'm here to listen, so that's basically my whole thing on this, why I wanted to start this. And I hope that this will continue where different people will join. And it's starting off good, but I want to learn about other countries and hear about their stories and everything. So
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think that'd be great. And even just the experience of individuals that are willing to share, right? Because I'm not comfortable sharing the experiences I've had with friends because it's not my
Yeah.
story to share. But
Yeah.
if they would be willing to come and talk on it themselves, then yeah, that'd be great. But really just, I guess, finding the right people that would be open and interested in doing so. That's something we can take away from this and try to look for that, right? And then we can...
Yeah, and it's just like, I don't know if it's going to go big, but it's just, starting small in the San Jose community is like a starting point for me, because it's just, I don't know, like, you can talk to other people from other countries to hear their standpoint, but I wanted to start small from San Jose, just talking to like the local people we know.
That's the beauty of Instagram, right? Like, we literally could be talking to people in other countries. And I do have friends in Japan that I did kind of pick their brain a little bit just for some insight. But yeah, I don't know if they'd be willing to jump on a live with us. But so yeah, again, I could ask. So we can do that. And again, just looking for people from different cultures or with different experience. It doesn't have to be different cultures, right? It could be another Vietnamese person that has a personal story. It could be another Japanese person with a personal story, whatever it is.
Yeah, and you know what? I know that this, as we said earlier, this is a controversial topic, you know, not trying to offend anybody, just talking about the matter to just raise awareness and just, you know, if anybody can provide education on it, help us. Like, it would honestly help because maybe some people don't know where to seek, and these live feeds can help them. And I don't know.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much, Jado. It was an honor and a privilege to do this. Yeah, I think we have a little bit of homework. We can see if we can reach out to people that would want to join another one, and then we could actually have a little open discussion with. I don't know how many people we can have. I've run one of these with 3. I'm assuming you could probably do 4.
Okay.
I've done group chats. I think it was up to 8 people, but it does get a little chaotic when everyone's talking over each other.
That sounds like a Zoom meeting.
Yeah, that's actually another
Okay.
option. We could always do a Zoom. It just wouldn't be live.
Uh-huh.
I think there are ways to stream it though, like via Twitch and stuff, but that's a little bit out of the
You know,
realm of what I've
you're
used.
the IT guy.
Not really. But yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Thank
But
you
this
so
is a
much.
start. Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
And then next time, hopefully, we can connect, and you know, we can have somebody that can provide us insight and education. You know, I'm not here to educate anybody. I'm just here to just, you know, start up this topic, and hopefully, somebody out there that's listening can provide us some insight, education, anything.
Yeah.
You know, their own experience from it. So.
I was just here to provide food for thought. Something to think about, right?
But thank you, everybody, for chiming in. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Next time, hopefully somebody else will join us. But this is a starting point, and hopefully it goes somewhere with it.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks, Jado. All right.
Bye.
Take care. Have a good night. Have a good weekend.
You have a good weekend, too.
All right. Bye.